Well, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. This is Kim Davis, Editor-in-Chief of The Hub, your marketing technology resource, welcoming you to another Hub webcast. Today's event is sponsored by Proof HQ, a Workfront company, and the topic is 4 ways to improve the effectiveness of your content marketing. You know, today you only have a few seconds to make a positive impression on consumers, so how do you create content that attracts, engages, and endures in people's minds? Today we're going to explore strategies and processes in the areas of marketing operations, collaboration, compliance, review and approval to provide your team with a strong foundation for effective content marketing. A couple of very quick points before we begin. We'll be making the slide deck from today's presentation and a link to the audio available to you in a follow-up email. And also, don't hesitate while you're listening to the presentation to start sending us in your questions so we can hopefully get round to answering as many of them as possible. So let me introduce today's speakers. They are Kelsey Ebelhair, Solutions Marketing Manager for Proof HQ, where she is responsible for planning and executing go-to-market strategies that are motivating to target markets through marketing programs, product launches, and sales delivery. And Michael Cunningham, the Content Marketing Manager for Proof HQ, where he's responsible for driving awareness and demand for the company's software offering through high-level content planning, content creation, and publishing strategy. And first up, I believe, is Kelsey.
Yes, great. Thank you, Kim. Hello, everyone. My name is Kelsey Ebelhair. I'm the Solutions Marketing Manager, as mentioned, from Proof HQ. I'm now a Workfront company. So let's go ahead and get started. And what I want to do is start by asking a simple question. So think about in your organization or maybe in your agency today, is it clear to you and even to your team what an effective or a successful content marketing program looks like? So think about that for a second. Is it cloudy? Is it jumbled? Is it simply unclear to you and your team? If you're kind of struggling to find that answer, we'll let you know you're truly not alone. We're actually, even on our team within Proof HQ, we're going through the same exercise ourselves within our marketing team. We're really in the process of defining exactly what our effective content marketing strategy looks like. So we're even going to take some of the tips that we provide you today to really define what our strategy looks like so we can make sure we're executing effective marketing campaigns. So throughout the presentation today, we're going to reference the Content Marketing Benchmarks, Budgets, and Trends report from the Content Marketing Institute. So the first thing I want to talk about here is we'll look at the B2B side first. So it says here 55% of business-to-business marketers, they're reporting that, again, you're not alone. It's unclear that they truly understand what an effective content marketing program looks like. And then when we look on the B2C side, same thing is happening across organizations. We're seeing even higher percentage on the B2C side. So 58% of business-to-consumer marketers are reporting that they either don't know or they're unsure. They have an unclear image or vision of what an effective content marketing program looks like. So again, we just want to really make it clear that it's in the overarching issue that we're seeing across both B2B and B2C organizations and agencies. So what today we want to do is really clarify it with you and really provide you with some steps and some takeaways to help you improve the effectiveness of your content marketing strategy. So with that, Michael, I'll turn it over to you to kind of kick us off.
Well, thank you very much, Kelsey, and thank you everybody for attending. So, you know, the point of this webinar is asking the question, what exactly does an effective and successful content marketing program look like? You know, is it like art? You'll know it when you see it, or is it like a Rube Goldberg machine? You know, it may be overly complicated, but it gets the job done. Funny aside, this shows my age against Kelsey's age, where I had to reference the game Mousetrap to let her know what a Rube Goldberg contraption is, which is, as in this illustration, this gentleman here just wants to mail a letter. But he's built a contraption that gets the job done, but it's overly complicated. And so what we want to do today is help you be less Rube Goldberg-ish in building your strategy. So we're going to cover these 4 ways to improve the effectiveness of your content marketing. So while there may not be one particular formula for success, what we're going through right now is we're implementing strategies and processes in regards to marketing operations or operations in general, collaboration and communication, marketing compliance, and the review and approval workflow. All of these things will provide your marketing team or your creative team with a stronger foundation for effective content marketing. So let's take a look at the first one, marketing operations. Now, marketing operations, if you have that department in your group or that role, it's involved in many aspects of a marketing campaign, from strategic planning and data management to analysis and reporting. Additionally, one of the key responsibilities of operations is developing and documenting content marketing strategy and workflow processes. So why is a written plan important? In the CMI study, they found out that many marketing teams lack documented strategies, and despite its proven success, the study shows that just 32% of B2B marketers have a documented content marketing strategy, and only 28% have a documented editorial mission statement. On the B2C side, it's about the same, where only 37% report that they have a documented strategy. Now, in both cases, marketers who have a documented content strategy get better results with the tactics, social media platforms, and paid methods of content distribution they use. So clearly, taking the time to document is worth it. Now, again, there's no right way to create the strategy, but the point is that you have one and that you write it down. So some of the questions that we're asking ourselves at Proof HQ for building the strategy comes down to some of these bullet points right here. One, have a mission statement. So you want to start with something like, make it a template, like, we want to become the destination for target audience interested in topics to help them solve particular pain point, right? So you have that mission statement, but then you have a brand story as well, where you characterize your content marketing in terms of what ideas and messages you want to communicate, how those messages differ from the competition, and how you see the landscape evolving once you have shared them with your audience. Then the ever important mapping the content to the customer journey. Where does that piece of content fit in the journey of the sales? Is it the top of funnel? Is it the middle funnel? Is it the bottom of the funnel? That helps you determine the content to create and when to deliver it, which goes into the next point, which is thinking through your distribution plans and, of course, documenting them. What is the proper distribution channel? When is it the proper time to distribute it? And then always be testing, right? The goal of your content marketing is to deliver the right piece of content to the right person at the right moment in the sales funnel so that you'll either engage with them or encourage them to take action. Because the goal is to work smarter, not harder. So if something isn't working, redo the strategy. And if your marketing team doesn't have a marketing operations role, that's okay. Because now a fair number of the Proof HQ customers do have that role. But the point of bringing up marketing operations is to get you to think in an operational way. If you are primarily in the creative side of things and you're watching this webinar, you don't tend to think of things in an operational methodology. And so I want you to think operational for this point of this part of the exercise. So when your team has a particular strategy and a set process to follow, then everyone knows what is expected of them and work will get done more efficiently. Not only that, but with these processes clearly defined, your creative team will be freer to focus on delivering content that is original and engaging. All right, so let's go to the second point, collaboration and communication. Now, this seems like a given, right, that it's an essential role, everybody's going to be doing it, but that doesn't mean everyone is doing it right. So let's take a look at some more statistics here from CMI. Fewer than half of the B2B survey respondents meet on a weekly or more regular basis to discuss their content marketing program, even though 54% say that meetings are valuable to their content marketing. Collaboration is clearly worth the effort, but why such a low number of meetings, even when content marketers in general say they are valuable? I think we all know the answer to that one. Meetings suck. They generally suck time and resources. They hinder productivity and can even affect employee morale. One survey that I saw says that they can result in $37 billion in lost salary annually in the United States. And furthermore, most of us consider meetings just a flat-out waste of time. Another survey that I saw from Bain & Company that they conducted on time management revealed that on average, an organization's workforce spends about 15% of all collective time sitting in meetings. Senior executives, on average, devote more than 2 days each week to meetings with 3 or more coworkers. Now, there's also a ripple effect when it comes to meetings. The process of preparing for a meeting can also eat up valuable time if not handled properly. So while I'm focusing on meetings in general, the same idea can be had for how you collaborate. There are some best practices that you can use to collaborate, and one of them is meetings. I don't want you to shy away from meetings. They are very, very important. But keep in mind that the frequency of your meetings is probably more important than the amount of time that you schedule. You don't need to schedule hour-long meetings if it's not necessary, and just because that's what pops up as the default in Outlook. You need to think through planning these meetings. And so what I want to do is share with you some tips that you can use to help make sure that meetings don't suck, or at least suck less. And you can also apply some of these tips to how you collaborate with your coworkers. So 1, have you established the goal of the meeting? 2, have you determined if you even need a meeting? And have you planned out your meeting ahead of time? All of these things are adding purpose to your meetings. Don't just schedule a meeting for the sake of having a meeting, or schedule a meeting because you've had this same meeting once a week, every week. You just have this meeting. You plan them out. You plan an agenda. Have you invited the right people to these meetings? You don't need to add extra folks to a meeting just because you think they should be there. The most important people for a meeting are those that actually contribute to moving all of the agenda forward. You don't need any hangers-ons or people observers, because if they start chiming in, the duration of the meeting is going to stretch out. And speaking of the duration of the meeting, have you determined an appropriate duration? Sometimes a shorter meeting adds extra urgency to getting things done rather than coming in with an hour-long meeting and trying to fill that space. Some other steps for hosting meetings that don't suck. Have you selected an appropriate location and time? Right, so is your conference, is it a conference room? Is it a hallway? What's going to be the ideal location and the ideal time of day to help move the meeting quickly and help the purpose of the meeting be accomplished? Have you established rules of engagement? For example, this is an update meeting only. People are not going to be contributing feedback. Or if it's a brainstorming meeting. Also, have you considered making the meeting device free? So no laptop for note-taking, no cell phones for texting. It's a device-free zone, which can help people focus on the task at hand and getting through. Same thing goes for collaboration. If you've ever been on, many of you right now might be on this webinar listening to me while answering your email. You're multitasking. Making the meeting device-free limits multitasking and invites focus to get the project done. Now, the final 2 steps. Have you written an informative invite? Have you taken the steps to ensure the meeting ends on time? Again, purpose. Have you prepared everybody for when they walk in, they know exactly what's going to happen, because you wrote a really good meeting invite with attached agenda, and boom, you're off and running when you walk in. You're not sitting around spending 10 minutes in idle chit-chat. The meeting has purpose. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and you can get it done on time. So a couple other collaboration tips. Don't make these meetings department exclusive. Everyone has a role in content marketing, from sales to management, to operations, to creative, etc. So you want to break down those silos and meet as a team. Again, those team members need to be necessary to the meeting, but don't exclude people just because they're in a different department. And then finally, encourage camaraderie on your team. The more friendly you are with one another, the greater trust there will be amongst teammates, and the more natural communication will become. And at the finality of that is having a documented strategy, like we did in step 1, helps keep everybody operating on the same frequency. All right, so I'm going to kick it over to Kelsey to talk about our third tip for ensuring an effective content marketing strategy, and she's going to talk about marketing compliance.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. So yeah, the first one we talked about operations, then we moved into more of a collaboration tip, and now we're going to move into marketing compliance. Now, I don't want everybody to sit there and cringe because they hear the word compliance. We're really talking about, more than just keeping content marketing out of trouble. It's making sure you have an effective brand standard. So it's really, we've seen technology, it's taken over privacy laws and compliance guidelines. They've really become an even bigger focus for the entire marketing world. So there's a slew of continually changing regulations in place that are really designed to protect consumers. So your marketing team should have a compliance strategy in place to really keep up with these constant changes and protect your company from costly violations. It's at its most basic. It means that your team should know about any type of disclaimers are necessary for any type of content, what mistakes to avoid, and even who they should go to if they have any questions regarding these different types of regulations. Because compliance is not just for those highly regulated industries. You're thinking healthcare, financials, etc. Compliance goes across any type of business that has any brand guidelines. So really, at the end of the day, we're focusing on protecting those consumers. So there are kind of 3 ways that we break out compliance and talk about these. So if your advertisements don't comply with the law, these are some of the things that could potentially happen, right? And this is, we ensure that compliance and make sure that these 3 things don't happen to us. So, for example, advertisers under FTC jurisdiction, this could mean even orders to cease and desist. So heavy fines that could come up, even $16,000 per violation, right, that could occur within your organization. So making sure that the truth with an advertisement is there. Even injunctions by the federal district court could happen as well if we're not following those specific marketing compliance guidelines. So, for example, violations of some commission rules could also result in civil penalties. And even criminal and contempt proceedings. So again, just kind of staying away from the injunctions that could occur if you're not marketing compliant with any type of marketing and content marketing that you're creating. And then the last one there is refunds to consumers for actual damages in civil lawsuits. So again, it's going back to protecting those consumers and avoiding that, having to refund consumers for actual damages in those civil lawsuits. So again, kind of really not only the losing the trust in consumers, but actually having physical fines that could fall if there's not a compliance strategy in place for your content marketing. Which brings us kind of to that next section is, even if you have a legal team or a compliance officer who's really their main focus is the regulation of compliance standards, which in our opinion is probably a good idea. So really keep your team informed on basic regulations and ensure that everyone knows and everyone understands what your compliance process is. And you'll save a ton of time and valuable time and more likely to avoid those potentially, again, costly mistakes that could cost your business or agency. You don't know where to start? It doesn't hurt to just abide by that old notion of truth in advertising. Use that as really your guiding light to make sure you're on the right path. We had a great webinar that we ran last month just specifically focused on marketing compliance, and we had the VP and head of compliance from LendingTree, and he really brought compliance in at the beginning of content creation. So he would use, a software I'll talk about a little bit later, but he would use compliance at the beginning of that content marketing strategy to ensure that throughout the content brief and creative brief process, those standards were set in place, so we didn't get to the end of development of some type of campaign or content marketing piece and have to scrap the whole thing because it wasn't compliant. So again, kind of putting in those processes and just really relying on the truth in advertising is really your guiding light. So with that, it kind of leads me right in. Yeah, please.
So, I'm sorry, Kelsey, I just want to jump in because you talk about the truth in advertising. You just mentioned our good friends at LendingTree, where they actually have, their mantra is when it comes to disclaimers and disclosures, their guiding light is, can your grandmother understand it? So truth in advertising, tell the truth and make it simple.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. That's a good one as well. When you're trying to explain, sometimes even in technology, we try to explain, what we're doing. Kind of dumb it down and make sure, like Michael said, can your grandmother understand it? And that can really kind of give you a baseline of where your content, the effectiveness of that, sits within compliance. Great. So let's kind of move on to that fourth tip that we have for you. So this is the review and approval process. So how can review and approval really streamline this entire content marketing process for you? So really what we've seen with the rise of technology, life in the marketing and creative departments have really changed drastically. People are using more digital means to access the content that you're creating. And that's making it critical that we extend any type of creative campaign, marketing campaign across mobile devices. So now we're being able to access content, whether it's on our smartphone, our tablet, our desktop. All of that content has to be consistent and optimized for any of the platforms that our consumers are viewing it on. And simply the sheer volume, right, of any type of content or creative asset, that has increased drastically over the last 10, 15 years, and that breadth of media has grown as well. Again, going back to the different ways that consumers are taking in and digesting that content, whether it's through web, images, video, interactive. There's so many different types of content, types of media, and ways that they can access this content. So what's really important is it also means that we must implement tools that really help keep content flowing through that entire review and approval process, because at the end of the day, it's really going to make it easier to get things to market faster if we can not see review and approval as a bottleneck to getting our content to market. And making sure, of course, that it's adhering to all of those brand guidelines that we're working on. So any effective content marketing strategy and workflow, we need to take into account the review and approval process. So in a review and approval, it really tends to be one of the dreaded aspects of content marketing. And it's often one of the biggest time suckers during the creative process. So with a proper workflow in place, we can improve the efficiency of the review and approval and ensure really that we're completing the creative content on time and it comes through without any glaring errors that we need to go back, add in rework. It's going to cost us more time and more money before we can get it to market. So we'll see here on this slide. For the most part, the marketing, creative, review, and approval process today, it's very manual, very resource heavy, and many times simply inefficient, right? And so most companies are still managing that entire review and approval process through email, large PDF files, sending them back and forth, even using FTP to send artwork. Or they could be simply manually walking proofs of content from reviewer to viewer within the office. And God forbid, even sending faxed copies of design for feedback. So stakeholders are really generally collaborating via email, and layered on top of that are all these dozens of additional, very manual, repetitive tasks, right? And really at the center of this maelstrom of manual activity really typically sits that marketing or that project or traffic manager who acts as the traffic cop to really make sure that the process is moving smoothly and staying on track. So you can see here, this workflow, it may work fine for you, but the risks that are really associated are conflicting comments, conflicting decisions. Somebody may be the bottleneck because they may be out of office, maybe even file size limits when you're emailing something that's too big, perhaps. service stability if the files get too big, or say someone doesn't have an Adobe Creative Suite downloaded on their computer. They can't open that Illustrator file. So really keeping track of all the different files, making sure we have all the right versions are distributed to the right people, and spending that additional time and effort with teams, outside the review team. So as we go to the next slide here, what we're going to see is something a little less complex, right? As you can see here in this example, it's much, much more organized and optimized, right? It looks a ton more efficient. So online proofing with ProofHQ really puts a completely different workflow around managing the creative review and approval process. What it does is it changes and it grows with your business, which is what it's supposed to do. And it's way better than sending those email attachments, sorting through individual comments, even sharing with other team members and tracking. So I'll focus kind of on the research by a company called IntelliLink. It's an independent consulting firm that specializes in marketing process reengineering to verify and kind of quantify some of the profit metrics. So what kind of return on investment can you get from a very streamlined review and approval process that's driven by essentially an online proofing solution? So one of those statistics that came through is just a more productive workflow, so getting projects done faster. We can see here this simple, seamless workflow that kind of starts with a creative brief and runs through all these different stakeholders within the business for a specific piece of content marketing. By really using that solution, you can get things to market a lot faster because it is a simple workflow. You can manage different versions and segmentations across different output channels. Because really, proofing and approval, it can be a nightmare if you don't have that standardized, streamlined workflow that really makes it possible if you have complex review and approval process within that. The second kind of statistic that came out of this survey that I want to share is just talking about simply taking down the different types of revision and rework that's involved, because the more rework we do, that's going to cost us more time and effort, and the more time that it costs us, it's simply going to be a time cost to our business. So really reducing the effort, spending and managing that complex review and approval process. So no more searching through those emails, getting it into the right solution for your business. So what I want to do here is kind of wrap up kind of the 4 tips that we've really talked to you about today. So the most effective B2B and both B2C marketers are those who understand a successful marketing program. They collaborate frequently and they have documented strategies. So think if your team is lacking in any of those areas, really try adapting some of those processes that we talked about here above, and see if you don't notice an improvement in your content marketing. Remember, it's really about documenting, collaborating, making sure that your team, your entire marketing team understands and remains compliant. And then go through that review and approval process. Review, revise, and review again, making sure that your content marketing process is not hindered by that review and approval process. So again, that first one we talked a lot about looking at marketing operations, defining that entire strategy. Write it down, see how that marketing strategy is working for your team. See where those bottlenecks may be within your organization. And then, of course, collaborate. Find a way that you can have that single source of truth, and make sure that, yes, use meetings, but use them effectively, and make sure they make the most of everyone's time. And again, compliance, and of course, the last thing was review and approval. So with that, I want to kind of share with you some of the top brands, share a little bit of information about ProofHQ. So we power both brands and agencies globally across the world. So very simply, we're the company that just defines and leads the global market for online proofing, which is a online SaaS application that provides a solution for creative review and approval. And we really do this by delivering simply an unparalleled experience for our employees and our customers. So Proof HQ, we were founded in 2007. We had just a simple realization that for most marketing teams, the process for managing the approve and approval process for any type of creative content, it was broken. And so we wanted to find a way that we could provide a very easy solution for creative review and approval. So we were recently acquired by Workfront. They are the leading enterprise work management solution for marketers and creative agencies. And now with the addition of Proof HQ, Workfront can deliver the most comprehensive marketing work management solution available in the industry today. So we're now able to combine project management, so the creation of an asset is now flowed through Proof HQ because it goes through that review and approval process at least once in its life cycle. And then we have that end-to-end system where we can push it into a DAM solution for that asset to be consumed or pushed out to the organization. So this slide here just gives you really a snapshot of our customer base, and it's about a handful of our nearly 3,000 customers that we have. But you can see that we work with a range of customers in size and industry, from retail to consumer packaged goods, healthcare, finance, and also even automotive industry. So we serve a pretty diverse group of organizations, and they have a range of business needs for online proofing, where we really see those core needs being is around content, and having that a lot of content that they're producing, the complexity of who's involved in the content creation, review, and approval process. And then the last kind of sticky scenario that we see is that going back to compliance, making sure that you have the right documentation and audit trail of content that's being created within your marketing team. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Kim. If there are any questions, we will go ahead and open the floor up to Q&A at this time.
Yes, sure. Everybody, be certain to submit your questions so we have a chance of getting around to answer them. Thanks, Kelsey and Michael. I'd also mention yet again that we will be sending a copy of today's slide deck and a link to the on-demand audio in a follow-up email you'll be receiving from us. So first question I had for you, I'm interested in this idea of a written, documented content marketing strategy. Some people may be familiar with that, some people less so. So I was going to ask, what needs to go into that? What should it look like?
I'll take that one. So we actually had a meeting yesterday with some key stakeholders around this process. So you're primarily trying to organize you get your key members of a team first of all. So when you're trying to develop what your content planning is going to be over the course of the year, the course of the quarter or month, you want to bring in your key stakeholders from certain groups, like obviously marketing, but product, sales, the people who manage your customers. If you're in for example, technology, those who interface with customers, you definitely want to get their input into what's going on in the world that your product serves and the needs that, the pain points that people are bringing up, and bring in your market research that you've done. Bring that all together, and you look for, try to find themes that you want to build your content platforms for the year or for the quarter or for the month. So you start with maybe you come up with 3 key themes for quarter 1 for 2016. And then you look at each one of those themes and decide what kind of piece of content, what's our main piece of content for that, and how can we create derivative assets around that. So, for example, maybe your key piece of content is an ebook. Then how do you promote that ebook? Do you do blog posts? There are social media posts. There are various types of not low importance, but smaller pieces of content that you can create that drives traffic to that ebook, where you hopefully will get them to give up an email or some other information. And then from that piece of ebook, you want to maybe drive them to the next step of your marketing funnel and get them to take a demo or a webinar or things like that. So you basically are trying to map that whole flow around a single piece of content. You don't want to just say, we need to make 16 ebooks. You want to be proactive instead of reactive, and that's the point of sitting down, coming up with your mission statements, your editorial mission statements, and mapping out the content to the buyer's journey. As you sit down and think of the content that you want to do, your main pieces, and the pains that they solve, and then build a workflow around that, build a distribution strategy around that. What piece of content affects the CTA to drive to the next step, and then the CTA for that to drive them to the next step, and so on and so on. And then you map that out over a 4-quarter period for the entire year. And again, you can test that as each campaign gets run, or as each piece of content gets made, and all the other things, the derivative pieces, get released. You test those, and if you find some things that work better than others, you can adjust your Q2, Q3, and Q4 strategies going forward.
I was really struck by the figures you gave, that I think it's something like a third of B2B and B2C companies fail to do this, to go through this documentation exercise. Is it because it's something they never did? Do they not know about it? I mean, it's a remarkably small rate of people actually doing what you're suggesting. Any idea why?
Well, one of the things that the Content Marketing Institute research finds is, I'm going to jump to a slide. So, wait a minute here. Do you have a documented strategy? You know, some say yes, and it is documented, but then you see, look at the 48% in this particular slide. Yes, we have a strategy, but it's not documented. And so that's that more of a reactionary content marketing strategy that a lot of people have, including, I mean, I'm guilty of that myself, where you think, I'm going to make this ebook and I'm going to distribute it and push it out there. And it's just more of a fling it to the wind as opposed to sit down and documenting the steps to take it through. So you can, again, this keeps everybody on the same page. Everybody knows what's happening because you've taken information from different stakeholders within the company to build out the strategy, to build out the campaign, and to build out the pieces of content.
Understood. I have a question here. Obviously, you've spoken a lot about what Proof HQ can offer, but the question is, can you name some marketing compliance resources?
Yeah,
absolutely. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kelsey.
No, yeah, I was going to say I can kind of run through a couple of those. So there are multiple resources that you can really use, kind of based on if you're looking at both a brand or agency. But one of the top ones that's going to come to mind is simply the FCC, so the Federal Trade Commission. So really this is that primary federal agency that's focused on consumer protection and regulation of different business matters associated with false advertising and fraud. So the FTC is one of them. Another one is just the Federal Communications Commission. So this is another, again, looking at federal regulatory body responsibility for false advertising and fraud in broadcast media. So that's back to your communications. Another marketing compliance resource that would be super beneficial to look into is advertising to children specifically. So this is a detailed article regarding laws that simply apply to marketing aimed at children. So a lot of times we see different contests and promotions that we're running, and if you're not putting in the fine print of talking, cannot go to have this content to children under the age of 18, right? We're looking at gambling, if it's a specific contest or sweepstakes. So making sure that when we're creating materials that are targeted at children, making sure we're abiding by the same marketing compliance there from advertising to children. Let's see, another one that comes to mind is children's online privacy protection. So another legislation regarding collection and use of personal information for minors as well. And then
so Kelsey,
the last one I can...
But Kelsey, just jumping in that, just recently in the news for that, the online, the collection of information from children and minors is the company VTech. They make a lot of electronic children's toys that information gets posted into the cloud, and that network was recently hacked. So that just shows the importance of developing security guidelines and compliance guidelines when it comes to what type of information are you collecting, how are you collecting it, how are you safeguarding it. These are all things that marketers do need to think about when it comes to, maybe marketers aren't going to build that like the data repository and the security standards, but they need to be able to communicate that and have that information at the ready should something like this happen, or parents inquire about how the information is stored and collected. These are the compliance and the disclosures that fill in for not only collection of the information about kids, but also there's the agency escapes me at the moment, but it's for the agency that manages the mortgages, the consumer lending organizations like Lending Tree, for example. Again, that's another area that has important disclosures that need to be put into place into their marketing material to ensure that they are, truth in advertising, truth in lending, that everything is simple and accessible. So those are some other areas that you would want to research for how to do the marketing compliance and to build out your little guidelines.
Yeah, I love that example too. Another kind of example that we've talked about recently too is with Skechers. So we found Skechers found this the hard way when they were ordered to pay $40 million to settle an FTC charges, that it deceived consumers with its toning shoes ad. So we all may be familiar with shape-ups or resistance runners or those tone-up shoes. So the company claims that the shoes could help consumers lose weight, even tone and strengthen certain muscle groups, and even improve their cardiovascular health. So the FTC came down and cited Skechers for falsely asserting clinical studies supporting the claims. So the consumers who purchased any of those shoes were really eligible for going back to that refund through the FTC or a class action lawsuit. So another example of making sure that we're compliant from an FTC standpoint and not falsely asserting any clinical studies supporting specific claims that you're putting on your advertising. Yes, those are great questions.
There's some great examples there, and of course anyone in the audience who's working in finance or healthcare, pharmaceuticals, very familiar with regulations and the need for compliance. So I was just wondering, are there any businesses or industries where you can sit back and say, look, this is all very interesting, but it's not really for me. I don't have to worry about compliance. I mean, even at the basic level of brand reputation, it's going to affect almost everyone, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll jump in on this one too, Michael, and feel free to add some color. But really, you're right. It's not just, compliance is not just for those highly regulated industries. Every brand has some type of brand standards or guidelines that are set by their company that either the internal brand team or even the agency has to adhere to. So they can include a size, shape, placement of your logo, even colors on your layout, font style, etc. And really, it's ensuring that you're having this consistent and uniform brand identity. So top blogs and even a consistent identity is essential for that long-term business growth. Because as you're seeing, you need to be able to convey that different outlook, that attitude to your consumers so that they are able to identify with your brand, using those brand standards, having that same consistent tone and messaging, because you're really building their trust with your brand through your content marketing that you're creating.
So a great example of that happened at my last company, where we didn't have an internal brand standards, published. It was just more in our marketing group. But somebody from sales was going to a local industry show and somehow found a low resolution copy of our logo and sent it to somebody to make trinkets, like a cup to hand out at this local industry trade show. And it was pixelated. It was stretched. It was not, it didn't conform to the size. It wasn't the proper size. It was scaled improperly. It looked horrible, and that was a wake-up call for my marketing team at that point to say, oh my God, we need to have these internal brand standards in place, and we need to share them with everybody in the company.
Wow, that's not something you want to see happen. I got a question which has come in here. Maybe even your very streamlined demonstration of a compliance workflow prompted this. If you're a small company What can you do to build compliance in? How do they go about it?
So yeah, if you're a small company, you might not have a legal team in place or a compliance officer in place, and so there are some common sense steps that you can take to build out compliance, and one of them is, just like I described, is just create your written marketing procedures and policies and distribute them to everybody in the company, but particularly make sure everybody in marketing is aware of them. Again, write them down, write them down, write them down. If you don't have you don't have enough people to manage that particular role of compliance, assign somebody who's that's their watchdog. Their secondary task is to pay attention to compliance issues and to help monitor those and enforce policies and procedures, and then obviously training and education for your staff, for the company, for the organization, or any other stakeholders that are going to be involved with compliance and your materials. And then you need to put that into the review and approval process. So that goes to step 4 of what we were talking about. You need to include a step of reviewing for compliance when it comes to your creative materials. You can't just create these things in a vacuum and then say, oh yeah, everything's spelled correctly, all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. Sure, it looks great, but you've missed something important because somebody that is assigned to compliance issues and monitor them didn't get to review that particular document, and it turns out maybe the copyright is wrong, or you've got a false disclaimer or a disclaimer that needed updated because it was old, or it was pointed out beforehand that you needed to add something, or something needs to be added at a certain place in the creative document. Those are some basic points. Just write it down, education, and find somebody to monitor it, and then make sure that it is part of your creative workflow.
That's an important way of looking at it, isn't it? Because there's something which is really sinking in for me as I listen to you, is that it's not a matter of putting together your piece of creative, whatever it might be, finishing it, making it perfect, and then going on to see if it's compliant. You really need the compliance checking process to be going step in step with creative along the way, don't you? Otherwise you're going back and reinventing from the beginning.
It's kind of like does the left hand know what the right hand is doing? The creative folks, they're the artists. They create beautiful pieces of work. They create effective pieces of marketing material that engage with consumers and drive them to take an action. But they're not going to be responsible necessarily for thinking about the compliance issues or accidentally breaking the law, for lack of a better description. That's what the other hand needs to be doing. That's what the other side is. So going back to the lending tree example, you educate them up front. Here's what you can and cannot do. Here's what you can and cannot say. And having that's where that written strategy comes into play, where everybody knows what's going on. They're all on the same page. Or I'll quote Kelsey, she likes to say, the single source of truth. Everybody knows what's going on. Everybody's keeping on the same project timelines, and everybody knows what they can and cannot say.
I've got a great question which really picks up from that. It's really about tracking versions, because once you get to the end of the kind of workflow you're talking about and release the creative, whether it be a slide deck, a white paper, out into the field, especially if you put it into the hands of a sales team, and they then go on to say to themselves, well, I can improve this, or I can change it around a little bit for this customer. What about tracking versions in the field, as it were? Is that purely a policy thing, or are there automated ways to do it? What's your view on that?
So tracking versions in the field. So my personal take is if somebody from sales tries to change a document that was approved by marketing, they should be fired. Because it just goes back again to process. Version control goes back to review and approval, where somebody is tracking each version and tracking the comments that go onto each version, and making sure everybody is commenting on the same version, and then moving the project forward. And if something needs to go back through the creation cycle, again, it's a written policy. It's so if somebody finds that something needs to be updated, you bring it back through the system. That's I'm hoping that's answering the question.
Yep, absolutely. Just another shout out to the audience. If you do have any questions still on your mind, this is, I guess, last call to get them in. I do have a question here about the improvements in your content marketing. It's something that was mentioned during the presentation, is that if you follow some of these tips, some of the advice you're given, you'll see improvements in the content marketing. But how do you know you're doing better? What are the metrics for it? Is it just a matter of sales conversions, or are there things specifically about the content marketing you can look at to know that it's going better?
That's a great question, and sounds like, Kelsey, you've got. Go ahead. I will jump in and add color from your answer.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a great question. I think it's one thing where marketing is getting more and more pressure to provide a seat at the table and to look at the metrics and see how they are affecting and driving the numbers within a business. And when we're looking at content and effective content marketing, it's making sure that we're tracking each piece of content that is tied to, if it's a specific campaign that we're running, or we're able to tie those into each customer throughout the life cycle, so we can see what content was used to create an impression that they clicked on, that they engaged with our brand. So being able to kind of track each step of that customer life cycle, whether that's implementing the tools that you're using and just looking even at simply Google Analytics and seeing, what type of impressions, what kind of clicks, what does your click-through conversion rates look like? Because the more you're able to convert each piece of content, the more you're able to look at that data, you can continue to optimize the content that you're delivering. You can see the content that's not working so well, so maybe we can pivot the messaging a little bit, or maybe this piece of content is working with a specific audience that you're targeting. So being able to look at that data and optimize the content that you're producing, not just optimizing it for device, but optimizes the physical messaging that you're delivering with each piece of content is important, because the more you can provide those conversion rates and you're seeing how the content is affecting the consumer throughout their customer life cycle, you can really then start to see what content drives sales conversions and picks up sales opportunities throughout that life cycle. Michael, do you have anything to add to that?
Not. The only thing that I would add to that is when it comes down to metrics and determining success, that is something that, again, is written into your plan. Some people might want conversions to be their primary driver of success. Others might want revenue, or what those might be. Also, the success metrics will vary based on the type of content that is being distributed. So again, what success metrics you have designated for your ebook are going to be different than your blog posts, and they're going to be different for your social media posts, and so on.
Yeah, it's really about those key KPIs that you set up, right? And I think we're doing the same exercise here at Group HQ as we're defining, what content, what KPIs do we want to associate to each type of content or campaign that we're delivering. That's what's really going to drive how we look at and what metrics that we look at that will influence those key performance indicators. That's a good point, Michael.
So there's some really clear insights into things people ought to be not only thinking about but actually striving to implement. So Kelsey and Michael, I'd like to thank you very much for your presentation today.
It was our pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Well, and more than that, of course, thanks to everyone in the audience for joining us. You can join us every day, of course, at thehubcoms.com for your marketing technology stories. And this is Kim Davis, editor of The Hub, saying thank you and bye for now.